Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to be talking about a few of the SketchUp concepts that I didn't really touch on much last week or didn't really get much time to go into. And then I'm also going to talk about some of the ways that SketchUp is good and some of the things that it's best at by showing you a few of my own examples just to give you sort of a good idea of the kinds of things that you can use it for. And then I'm going to wrap this up by going over what's going to be required for the second lab assignment, and then sort of showing you the start to that process. All right, so to begin, the first thing that I want to talk about is how to do arrays within SketchUp. Okay, so we've done arrays within Revit, and basically an array is when you are copying something multiple times in a series. Okay, I want to cover this because you're not going to use it all the time, but in situations where you find that you do need it, it's pretty useful to have or to know how to do, and the way you do it is not super evident. All right, so for example, I'm just going to start by creating a basic cube shape, and then I'm going to extrude this upward just like that. Now let's say I wanted to make a grid of these cubes and I wanted them to be equally spaced. So if I were to go to my top-down view and make my camera parallel projection to get a totally flat view to see this a little better. Let's say I want to copy this cube, and I'm going to make this a group, by the way. It's always good to make things a group after you make them. I'm going to copy this cube to the right 5 times, and then I also want to do it up 5 times. And I want them to be spaced, I don't know, maybe 5 feet apart. So if I were to highlight my cube and then go to my move tool, I want to select a point from where I want to copy from, and then I want to click my control key to start the copy. And let's see, so based on my distance here, if you look down here at the bottom right, it looks like I'm going to have to do something a little bit higher than 5 feet, so let's just say 7 feet apart. So if I were to go then and type 7 feet, that's going to start that copy to the right 7 feet. But now what you need to do in order to get an array is you need to type the number of items that you want and then an X. Okay, so if I wanted 5 of them, I would type 5X and hit enter. You can see at the bottom right it says 5X down here now. And even though it made the copy, you have the opportunity to change the number of arrayed items during this process if you don't click anything. So I typed 5X, but maybe I want 6X. So I can type 6X to get another one, 7X. Or if I decided, you know what, I do want just 5, I just go back and type 5X again. And you can do any number you want. So you could go back down to 2X or 1X or again 5X. Okay, so that's how you do a linear array. Okay, so then once you're satisfied with that, you just want to click once, and that's going to complete the array and make the copy. After that, you can just highlight all these items again, and then we can do our copy, click once, move up, type 7 feet again, and then again 5X, and there we have our linear array. And it was super easy to get a nice grid of evenly spaced elements. So I'm going to switch back to my perspective view. So there's how that looks. Now, this is one of those tools where you don't really know that you need it until you need it. Okay, so it's kind of a situational thing. So the best time, or like the most times that I've needed this, are when, for example, I'm making a set of stairs or something like that. All right, so let's say I'm creating a stair tread. So I'm going to go back to my floor plan view here. And so I'm going to make a typical stair tread. So let's say I have something that's 11 inches in depth and then 3 feet wide. Okay, then I can go to my 3D view and I'm going to extrude this up maybe 3/4 of an inch. And then there's the stair tread itself. So now I can make all of this a group again by triple clicking on it to select everything, right clicking and going to make group. And now that I have my basic stair tread, what I would want to do is start copying this up to the right, you know, a set distance in order to sort of like make my stair run. All right. So I'm going to add in a few little helper lines here. So ideally you want the top of one stair tread to another to be 7 inches. So if I start here and I go upward 7 inches, so there's my distance in height from one tread to another. But then you also have to account for an overhang of your nosing on each tread. So a typical nosing is around 1 inch. So I want to draw this then to the right by 1 inch, or to the left by 1 inch. So there are my two little helper lines. All right, so now let's say I need like 7 stair treads to make this set of stairs. So what I can do is I can click on my tread down here, and then I can use my move tool and then click Control to do my copy. And I want to start at this point right here because that's going to be the top of my tread right there. So I want to start at that point right there and I want to copy it to this point. And now that I'm here, all I have to do again is just type 7x and you can see it just continues that copy for me, and then I can just keep it going as far as far as I need. So let's say I need 10. Just like that, it added 3 more for me and it was super easy. So again, in SketchUp you're going to be doing pretty much everything totally manually. And that might seem a bit cumbersome compared to something like Revit where things are a little bit more automatic, but also in certain cases it makes things easier because you're not tied to all those constraints within Revit. So, you know, sometimes when you're trying to make a flight of stairs, you'll get a bunch of errors because everything is constrained and things will start to break when you're moving things around. But if you know how to do everything within SketchUp like this and model all the components of these different objects, like stairs, for example, you have the opportunity to do a lot of really custom stuff that you just can't do in Revit, which is really nice. So while we're here, another thing that I could do if I undo all this is instead of having this simply as a group, just to review from last week, I could make this a component. So if I were to right click and then go to make component and then I type in stair tread, and again a component is basically the exact same thing as a Revit family. All right, so I'm just gonna leave it like that, just call it stair tread and then type create. And now that I have this, again I can go ahead and do my array, move, and then click on Control, copy to my little helper line there. Let's do 10. And now that I have those in a series, let's say I want to start customizing some things about this stair tread. Okay, so for example, maybe I want to round off the corners or something. So all I have to do to edit all of them is double click on one of them to get inside the component, and then I'm going to double click again just to make sure that I'm within the group that's in the component. And then I can go in here and I can start to adjust some things about this. So if I were to do an arc here, click my arc tool, and then let's see. Actually, I'm going to draw a small line. So if I start at my corner here, and let's say I just want to do like a 1/2 inch radius on this corner just to knock it off, I can type 0.5 inches just so that I get a little reference point right there that I can snap to. So now I can go to my arc, and then I can snap to that reference point and then go diagonally to the same reference line. So you just want to get to this point here where you have a pink line and it says tangent, and then you know that it's the exact same distance. So then once I have this pink line appearing on my arc, I can click to finish that, and then I can adjust this where I want it, which is going to be right there, and then click one more time to finish that. Now that I have that, I can simply use my push-pull tool, and I can extrude this down and get rid of that corner. And since this is a component, obviously it's going to do it to every single stair tread that I have in the model, which is really cool. All right. So that's basically it for the arrays, and that's why they're handy, because things like stairs, again, it's very situational, but when you need it, it's going to be nice to know how to do it. All right. Second thing I want to talk about is the follow me tool. So I did this very briefly last week, but I'm going to show it again because it's something going forward that we're probably going to be using a lot more. All right. So the follow me tool is a tool. If you click on your tools tab up here, you can see it is right there under follow me underneath the push and pull. And what this does is it's basically the equivalent of the sweep tool in Revit or the sweep tool in Rhino. So you have to have two things to do a sweep successfully. You have to have your sweep path is the first thing, and then you have to have your profile. Okay, so your profile is basically the shape of whatever, or it's like the cross section of whatever your object is. Okay, so situations where you would use this, the biggest ones that I use it most often for are things like baseboards and crown molding and just trim in general. All right, so let's say I have a crown molding profile. And actually, I think I have a drawing file from last semester that I can pull. So I'm going to see if I can find that and bring it in and then show you that as the example. Okay, so this is just a DWG file that I had that has a few different molding cross-section profiles within it. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to show you how you can use the follow me tool to basically create different moldings within a project. All right, so when I import my DWG, it basically groups everything together. So what I want to do is kind of go in here and break everything apart. So I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to explode this just to get the individual profiles. And then these are all individual line segments now. So what I need to do is go in and group each of these individually. So I'm going to group this one, then I'm going to group this one, and then I'm just going to do that for all of them. That one I'm just going to get rid of. Come on. All right, so there's my profiles. And you don't have to import something custom like this. It's always nice to. So if you're able to track down a specific profile online of something that you want to use, which this is something I've gone over in the past, but there are different companies who do architectural millwork, and you can get these profiles in DWG format straight from them, which is what I did in this case, which is really handy if you're doing something custom. But if you just have a basic idea of what it needs to look like and you don't need to go to that level of getting something exact, you can always just go in here and draw in your own profiles, right? So basically like that, right? You don't need to track down DWGs, but it's nice to have them when you can. So basically, once you're at this step and you have a profile drawn, what you want to do is go ahead and establish your path. All right, so let's say I have a room that is 10 by 10. All right, so I'm going to grab all these profiles and I'm just going to go to my top view and I'm going to move them sort of into the center of my room, so somewhere out in here. And then I'm going to start drawing at the origin. So I'm going to draw 10 feet in that direction, and then let's go 10 feet in that direction, and then we'll just finish that off. Okay, then what I want to do is offset this shape outward. So use my offset tool, click on my surface, and I'm going to offset this outward 5 inches to get my wall thickness. I'm going to delete out this surface now in the center, and then I'm just going to extrude this up by 8 feet. Okay, so there we go. We have a very basic room. And I want to put baseboard around the bottom, and I want to put crown molding around the top. So next, what I need to do is triple click on this to select everything, and I need to group these together as walls. So I'm going to make a group, and these are going to be walls. Then what I'm going to do is move my profiles into the correct location. So I'm going to start with my crown molding, and what I need to do basically is rotate this so it's standing upward. All right, so I'm going to go to my rotate tool, and I'm going to go to one of these corners. And now if you look at my little protractor that I have on my cursor, being that circular thing with the lines on it, if I try to rotate this, it's going to be rotating it just on the floor plane. It's not rotating it up and down. So what you need to do is hover over the point where you want to rotate, and then you need to use your directional arrow keys, and you need to click on them until you get the correct plane. So if you look at this here, in relationship to my axes that I have running through the project, you can see my planes. So when I clicked on my right arrow, it set this up as it's going to be rotating on the red plane, which is what I want. Okay, if you were to click the other keys, it's going to toggle through the other planes, so you can kind of see how that changes. Basically, the left one is going to do the green plane, the right one is going to do the red plane, and the top one is just going to do the floor plane. So I'm going to do my red plane, and I'm going to click on that corner now, and I'm going to choose this point right here, and I'm just going to rotate this upward until it snaps to the 90-degree angle, which if you look down here, you can see that's the angle it's snapping to. You also have the opportunity to just type in your angle at this point. So if you didn't want to try to snap it, or if it's some weird angle like 45 degrees or something, you just want to get it started rotating in the correct direction like that, and then go ahead and type in your angle. So now I can just type in 90 and it's gonna flip it up vertically. Okay, cool. So now that I have that, what I want to do is move this into the correct location. So I'm going to have to move this from this edge back to the wall right there. And then I want to move it vertically so that it's in line with the top edge of the ceiling. So you can do this in a 3D view. If it's easier, you can also switch to an elevation view. And if you go to an elevation view like this and you want to see through your objects, again, you can just click the X key. That's what we set up in the previous lecture. So this switches us over to X-ray mode, which is a really way to see what we're doing in elevations and stuff like that. So next I just need to find the correct elevation. So there we go. And now I can see that if I click on my top corner here and then move straight up, I just want to get this started moving straight up. And then what I want to do is hold my shift key. Holding the shift key is going to lock it to only moving vertical. If I did not hold the shift key, I run the risk of accidentally snapping this to a face that I don't want. So in this case, I'm not sure that's what it's going to do if I were to click. In this case, it did it correctly. But sometimes if you're trying to move vertical and you hover over the wrong point or something like that, it's especially hard to see in an elevation view when you can't tell where all the points are. It could do something like this where it snaps it to a point that you're not intending it for it to snap to. So what you always want to do when you're moving something in a straight direction is click and then drag in the direction you want to go, and once it's locked to that direction, hold your shift key, and that's going to keep it going perfectly straight. So now I can reference any of these points here along the top. I could reference this one all the way over here and click, and it's just going to snap it so that those are all totally flush in the same plane. Okay, so now that's in the correct spot vertically. And the last thing I'm going to do is center this up within the room. So I'm going to, again, find a point on this profile, and I'm going to start moving it to the right now. And now I'm going to hold my shift key. Okay, so when I hold shift, again, that's locking it. So I can only move it left or right. And I want to just hover over the edge of the wall until I find the midpoint. And once I find the midpoint, I'm just going to click once, and that's going to complete that. All right, next thing that we need to do is create our path. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to double click inside of my profile. So now you can see I'm within the profile itself because everything got grayed out and just the profile is surrounded by our bounding box. I'm going to then go ahead and draw in sort of a rectangle shape along these top edges of the wall. So I'm going to switch to my shapes tool where it says, or it's the rectangular one, and I'm just going to do one point to another point diagonally, just like that. So now if I click my X key, you can see that create just a solid plane over top of everything. And I want to just go ahead and click on that plane and delete the surface. Okay, so I only really want the edges. Now that I have that, I'm going to use my H key, and that's going to hide all of the geometry that I don't really care about seeing right now. I'm only concerned about my profile and the path for the sweep. All right, so next thing is we have to make our profile here a solid shape. The easiest way to do that is create just an extra line segment somewhere within here. So I'm just going to click on one of these endpoints, and you can kind of draw this to anywhere. Usually I just do it through the middle of the profile and I snap it to another point. But once you do that, you can see it fills this in with a solid piece, and then I can use my eraser and just erase that line. So now I just have a solid surface for my profile, and then I have my actual path here. Okay, so now here's the final step of this. We have to select all four of these lines. So holding my control key, I'm going to select all four of these lines. Then we have to go to the tools and then follow me. And then the final step is to click on our profile. Okay. So now that I've done that, you can see it takes that profile and it just follows it all the way around all of those lines, and it creates the crown molding for us, which is really nice. After we're done with that, we can go ahead and delete out our path. We don't need it anymore. So I'm going to delete all 4 of those. And then I'm going to click my H key again to unhide everything, so you can kind of get the preview of how that's looking. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now, one more thing that I'm going to cover here, and this is something that's called edge softening. So if you look at our geometry here that we modeled in, basically within our profile there are a bunch of individual line segments. Okay, and this is something that I kind of covered in Revit too. If you don't use a spline to make things, it's going to segment it, and it's going to cause all these individual flat segments within the geometry, which when you render that, it's going to be noticeable and it's not going to look great. So within Revit, there was not really a good way to deal with that other than kind of drawing over everything and recreating all of your segmented shapes as splines. But inside of SketchUp, we have a tool available to us that's going to allow us to automatically just soften all of those facets, which is really nice. So I need to remember how to do this because they changed things a little bit. So if I right click on my default tray here at the top and then click on Manage Trays and then select my default tray, you can see under this dialogues section, there's this one that says Soften Edges. So I'm just going to check that and then click Close. And that should put a new tab within my tray over here on the right side. So here at the bottom now, you can see I have this one that says Soften Edges. So what I want to do while I'm still in this group is just triple click on my crown molding to select everything. And then you can see here it says this angle between normals 20 degrees. I just want to play with the slider until I see all of those facet lines disappear. So I'm just going to toggle that up just a very slight amount, and you can already see what that does. Okay, so if I click off of that, now we just have a really nice smooth crown molding, and we didn't really have to do anything, right? We just had to select everything and then play with the slider. All right, so that is a super easy way to make some really nice crown molding. Then what you would want to do is just group all of this into its own layer. Okay, so we would want to go to the tag section, right? And we would want to create a new tag or layer. And I'm going to call this either trim or moldings maybe. And then just make sure that is tied to that moldings layer. And then if we toggle that on and off, does it disappear? And yes, it does. So I'm going to switch to moldings and make that to my active layer. And then I'm just going to add in a baseboard profile. So, and we can also do 2 at once as well. So I'll just do both of these at the same time. So this one is going to be a chair rail and this one's going to be a baseboard. So I'm going to select those. And you know, we could have also done all 3 at the same time if we wanted to, but it's up to you. You can do them individually, but if they're all going to be the exact same, you can do them all 3 at the same time, which is really cool. So I'm going to, again, rotate these vertically, 90 degrees. And we're gonna also have to make some other adjustments. So this one has to be rotated now the other direction, so I want to make sure I'm on my blue plane, and then I want to rotate that 180 degrees so it's like this. And now this one, let's see, this one is going to have to move so that it is at the midpoint of the bottom of the wall. So we'll just see if we can find that midpoint somewhere in here. Right there. And then it's going to be the same thing with this one. So I'm going to switch to a top view. And I'm going to click X so I can see through all of my geometry. And I just need to find that. Okay, so our profile is over here on the left. So go back to my top view. And okay, so there's my profile in plan view. So I'm just going to select this profile and I'm going to use my move tool. And I'm going to move this straight up, hold my shift key, and I'm just going to reference that midpoint there. And then I'm just going to move it back until it touches the back wall. So I'm going to click that back point, and then again holding shift, move it to the left, and I'm going to reference this inside point of the wall. Just like that, and that should be in the correct spot. So now the two of these are kind of over top of one another. Okay, so it still has to move back a little bit, so I'm just going to move it manually, just like that. There we go. Now, this profile I have selected is going to be a chair rail, so that's going to be kind of wrapping around the room, maybe 3 or 4 feet off the ground. So this one's got to be moved up, so we're just going to move that straight up. I'm just going to do 4 feet. I think that's probably going to be fine. No, let's drop it down to 3 feet. Something like that's probably okay. And now we have to kind of repeat our process. So to do this, I'm going to select both of these at the same time. I'm going to right click and I'm going to group them together. Then I'll just double click to open that group. And I'm going to click my H key now to hide everything else. All right. Now that we have this, I need to explode the two of these so that I just get the line work. So I'm going to select all of those and explode them. Go back into my group. And then I need to turn these into surfaces. So again, that's as simple as just adding a line from one point to another and then erasing it. So there's one. And then down here we'll do another one. There's 2. Okay. Now that that's done, I want to add in my path. So I'm going to click H again to bring back my other pieces of geometry. And I'm just going to do the same thing where I create a path up here around the top of the room. It doesn't really have to be in a specific place. So if we just leave it at the top, that's going to be fine. So I'm just going to go from corner to corner with my rectangle tool. Okay, that looks good. Then I'm just going to click H again to hide away that geometry because I don't need to see it. It just gets confusing. Then I'm going to delete out my surface. Now all I have to do is select all 4 of these lines here at the top at the same time, and then zoom in on my 2 profiles, go to Tools, Follow Me, and then click on both of them. So there's one, and it might make me reselect this, so I gotta select my path again, Tools, Follow Me, and there's 2. If you're doing really complicated geometry, like this is kind of complicated, it gave me that little error message, but you just got to look at it and make sure it looks okay. And in this case, everything does look okay, so that can just be ignored. So now I can just go ahead and delete out my path and do the same thing here where I am smoothing out all of these individual line segments. So I'm going to select all of the geometry, and then go here to my soften edges and then just tap on this slider and slide it up a very small amount, and it looks like it did what I wanted it to do. So now if I click off of it and I click my X key to switch back out of X-ray mode, you can see I have nice geometry. And that looks perfect. Okay, so it's not too hard to add in all this complicated detail within your models. And that may have seemed like a lot of steps, but compared to Revit, it's really not too bad. All right, in Revit, you have to create a whole profile family, load it in, mess with Revit's complicated tools. So SketchUp is really good for things like this because it's so easy to just add in complicated stuff really quickly. So there you can already see we have our baseboard, we have our chair rail, and we have our crown molding going around the room just like that. All right, so that's going to do it for the two quick things that I thought of that I wanted to cover. And then next, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the ways that you can use SketchUp effectively when it comes to your actual projects. All right, so I'm going to switch over to another project that I did in SketchUp and kind of walk you through it to just sort of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. All right, so here I am in my other model, and this is just a very basic project that I did, I think maybe a year ago for a friend of mine. And this was just a simple kitchen remodel, and she just wanted to get some ideas for how she could rearrange the space and how it could look. All right, so concept generation is probably the strongest reason to use SketchUp because it is very easy to get a quick idea of if something is going to work or not. All right, so I'm just going to kind of walk you through the entire process. So she called me and she said, I'm renovating my kitchen and I'm working with a contractor. They're not designers, but they were able to throw together some concepts and send them to me, but I don't really like what they proposed. So can you kind of take a look at the space and then model something and give me a few options that maybe the contractors are not really considering? All right, so that's kind of what I had to work off of. So I told her, I can do that for you, but you're going to need to send me some dimensions so that I can kind of work through this. So the first step was getting those dimensions. So this is what she sent to me. All right, so as you can see, this is kind of messy, but it kind of gives you the idea. So we have our living room down here at the bottom, and you walk in, and then this is sort of a dining space. And then off the left of that dining space, you go through this opening, and then you have sort of a galley kitchen. So everything is in a straight line, and it's really tiny. You have your refrigerator down here, and then there's a door down here at the bottom that goes downstairs to the basement. And then there's a door right here that then goes out to the backyard. All right, so she kind of wanted to open all of this up, get rid of this wall that's running down the middle here, and kind of make this entire thing a bigger kitchen. Okay, so her contractor she was working with proposed a few ideas, and actually let me see if I still have those. Okay, so this is what was proposed to her by the contractor she was working with. Again, they're not interior designers, so they didn't really consider too much. They kind of just came up with an idea, and that's as far as they went with it. So they basically just wanted to knock down that wall and kind of leave the layout of the kitchen as is, but then just add in this little peninsula here to kind of break it up, but then keep everything kind of where it was. And I didn't really like that one. I don't really like this weird situation here where we have our door kind of in the middle of the kitchen space. So this is your door, your back door to the house. So are you really going to want to walk straight into the middle of your workspace here? If you're cooking or something and somebody else needs to come in through the back door, are they going to get in your way? Also, this window is just kind of in a weird spot. It wasn't great. But they did all this in SketchUp, so this is just a basic SketchUp view without having done any rendering or anything. This is just the 3D view that they put together. They added in this little coffee bar thing here where the refrigerator used to be, but the overall plan is kind of very basic and it's not great. There's definitely a lot of wasted space in this configuration. So this area back here that used to be the dining room, it's not really utilized very well anymore because you can't really fit a table there with this bar setup, but there's also just a bunch of space here that you're kind of not utilizing very well. So she didn't like it and she wanted me to come up with some ideas. All right. So the best tool for me to do that was SketchUp. Okay, so this is kind of what I did. So I started by working in, no, I did not work in AutoCAD for this one. It would have been a good idea. Did I? Maybe I did. So let me see what I have in here. And hopefully this is not too laggy because this is kind of a bigger model. Okay, so I did work in AutoCAD a little bit, it appears. And I just went in there and I took her dimensions that she gave me and I went all the way around the perimeter and looked at all these little dimensions and everything in here. And I drew everything up into a very, very basic schematic line drawing just to get an overall sense of the dimensions of the space that I was working with. After I had that basic outline of the dimensions and everything, I was able to import that over into SketchUp, which is what you see here, and then start kind of drawing on top of that. Okay, so on top of that, which you can see down here at the bottom left, this was kind of my first stab at working on the space. So my first iteration was creating this sort of L-shaped kitchen and then having an island here. Okay. And then my idea was to move the door that was originally right here over here to the right and then take that opening where the door was and reframe that as a window and center the sink on the window. Okay, so obviously this is unfinished, but it was very easy for me to just kind of model a few of the basic components of the kitchen into here and then start establishing like where an island would go. All I had to do was off of my walls, just draw some lines. And that kind of gave me the location of where the island would go. And then I could just create the island as a simple box for now, right? So a good way to treat SketchUp is just blocking things out just to get a sense of dimension and space and if things are going to work or not. All right, you don't have to go super far with it if you don't want to. If you just want to use it as a tool in the initial stages to block out the space, to get an idea of flow and make sure that things are going to work, it's great for that. All right, so that's what I did here. I just basically sketched out some basic shapes and was kind of just working with what I had to see what was a possibility. So after I did that, all I did was just copy the entire thing, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want to break my model because it's probably going to blow up my computer because it's already running real hard. But you can just highlight and copy the whole thing over, and you can just do a bunch of iterations. So it's super simple. So highlight all this, copy it over. I'm going to turn off those drawings. And you can see here is a iteration now where I'm doing more of a U-shaped kitchen with a peninsula. Sort of like what they had, but a little bit different still. So in their proposal, they had this kind of peninsula shape, but they kept the door where it was. So I proposed, well, couldn't we just keep this as a window and have your sink looking out, which is what's typical. You typically in a kitchen have the sink centered on a window, and then move the door over here to the right. So that was a decent idea, but then you also have to consider, walking in from this room here, is there enough space from the edge of the counter to the edge of your wall, which is over here? And are you going to be able to fit in chairs comfortably, but also not inhibit access to that door that would be back here? So that was my second iteration, and I realized that probably wasn't going to be the best option. So from there, I then copied this over again, and I continued to iterate until I landed on this. Okay, so I decided it would probably be a bad idea to have your chairs in front of that door with your peninsula sticking out. So I then sort of did a combination of the first and second concepts, right? So I just sketched off of my lines here at the edge of the fridge and off of here to the right to sort of get my rough dimension for my island, right? So this falls in line with the edge there, and it falls in line with the edge there. And then I basically just worked out my dimensions between everything, and I determined how thick I would have, or how wide I would have to make this island, and then I just put a few chairs in here. So something more custom, right? A custom solution, because this is kind of like a weird space, and it would be hard to do just a traditional island in here. It's easier to put something sort of on a slant so that when you're coming into this room, you're maintaining your traffic flow all the way to this back door here. But then you're also able to get access to your basement door, which is over here. All right. So this is what we ended up settling on. And she showed this to her contractor, and they were able to work with it, and they did it, and she's happy with it, and it all worked out. But I used SketchUp for the entire process, okay? And it really didn't take that long. So going from a simple, line sketch that she gave me, being this, working off of this, and then transferring all these dimensions into first AutoCAD. You don't have to do AutoCAD if you don't want to, but I like to work in AutoCAD for the very initial step because it's easy to draft out the lines. Bringing that into SketchUp then, and then just blocking out the spaces, right? So the second example, I was putting the cabinet faces on just to kind of get an idea, but I didn't start out by doing that. I started out by just creating this. And this is even a little bit detailed as well. Like, you don't have to put in these toe kicks or anything, or the countertops. It can just be as simple as getting rid of your countertops and determining how much space the entire thing is going to take up, right? So your countertop's sticking out about that far then. So even just something like that, and just blocking it out and then measuring between things and seeing, oh, do I have enough space there? Yeah, I have 3 foot 2 inches. That's a good hallway width, but when I account for putting chairs there, is that going to be enough space to get to my door? So things like that. That is what I like to use SketchUp for, and that's what it's great at. So you don't have to use it for the entire design process if you don't want to, but it's certainly great for those initial steps where you're going to be generating ideas, seeing if things work. It's very quickly to iterate on things within SketchUp, right? Just create one concept, copy it, do another one, copy it, do another one, copy it. And then that way, let's say you're going to a studio critique or something, you have like 6 options there that you can show your professor, and you can all look through the options together and discuss and say, well, what works the best? So it's very, very good for doing that very easily. All right. So that's it for that example. And then the last example I'm going to go through is a little bit more of a professional project that I did for an architect. And I'm going to walk you through that, and that's sort of going to lead us into the second assignment. All right, so I'm going to switch over to that really quick. All right, so here is that other project. So this was a residential renovation that I did for an architect, sort of like a freelance job that I did. But he was basically looking to renovate the entire first floor of this house for a client. And he wanted me to model all of it and do some renderings for him so that he could show them sort of his concept and get them on board, because he was showing them his drawings, so like his floor plans and elevations that he had done, but it was very difficult for them to understand what the space was going to look like. So I modeled the entire first floor of the house within SketchUp to produce those drawings for him, and ultimately I produced an entire 3D walkthrough, which is something that we're going to do later on in the next module. All right, so I'm just going to kind of show you this one to give you an idea of everything you can do in SketchUp, and two, to give you a preview of what we're going to be doing in the upcoming module. And the Lab 2 assignment that we're going to be doing in this module, I'm going to have that carry over into the following module, and we're going to build upon that and take it to the next level and do our renderings and virtual reality and everything. But it's all going to start with our SketchUp model that we have here. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. We have our entryway, we have our dining room, we have a great room, and then we have a kitchen attached to that. And then back here we have this hallway, which is going to take us to a pantry, and this is a powder room, and then we have a laundry room. And then we have sort of like a breezeway with some built-in storage and some hooks for like coats and stuff like that. So I modeled all of this using all the techniques that I already showed you. So if we look at this in a little bit greater detail, all of the crown molding and all the trim and all the baseboard was done the exact way that I showed you previously in this video. The columns and things like that, that was all done using the Follow Me tool. But then most of this was done just by using simple extrusions. Okay, so just sketching out the shapes onto the floor plan and then extruding them straight up. And this is what I had to work off of. So he sent me his sketches, and we'll see if we can get those to load here. All right, so he sent me his sketches. So he did a total of 5 different sketches here. All right, and this is what his sketches look like. Right, so you can see there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of notes. Here he has some very basic elevations coming off of the floor plan so that he can remember the heights and of all these different elements. So this is the fireplace, and he's kind of showing you the archway over the fireplace. Some basic elevations for this bank of windows here at the bottom. But all kinds of notes to understand what is going on within the space. All right, and there's a bunch of these here. So after this, which I wasn't working directly off of this, but this was very helpful for me in some ways. He took this and he developed a series of floor plans, and he sent me the CAD files for the floor plans. So that's what I was mainly working off of when I was building all of this. Okay, so I wasn't working directly off the sketches, but I was working off his floor plans, which he made off the sketches. Okay, so off of that, I was able to build all of this. And for me to do this, it was only, I think this was a 40-hour job. Okay, so as you go through, it looks like a lot, but you get very efficient. Okay, and things don't really take as long as you would think. A lot of this stuff that's in here as well, so a lot of these little decorations and things, these are items that are built into Enscape, which is something we'll be covering in the next module, and it's all drag and drop. So a lot of those things to just populate the scenes and make them look a little bit more realistic, or just drag and drop and you plop them in, and then you just render them, which is really cool. All right, but that's kind of how the model is looking. I'm not going to go too deep into kind of how everything looks, because I think you kind of get the idea. All these windows and stuff, those were all custom, so I had to model all of those from scratch. But I was able to use some of his elevation drawings, and it really wasn't too bad. But I modeled in all those windows, and I basically just created them as components, so that way I could easily resize them and things throughout the project. And then all the casings and stuff, I kind of just, honestly, I just guessed on it. So I just drew my own custom profile, and I used the follow me tool, and I just made those as a sweep around all the openings. Okay. So I'm going to show you now something that is going to give you a better idea of what we're doing in the next module. Okay, and it's going to help you understand the space a little bit better. So this is the 3D walkthrough that I ended up producing for this project. Okay, so this is using a tool called Cloud Pano, and basically within Enscape, you can go to any point within the project and then render out a 360 panorama. And then once you have those panorama renderings, you import them into this online application and you link them all together. Okay, so whenever you're presenting something in 3D, you have a few different options. You could just create basic renderings, right? But those are kind of an older method. Like, that's the traditional way of doing it. And we have new technologies now. We want to take advantage of them. So you could do that. That's fine. But we also have these tools that allow us to do 3D walkthroughs. And then you could also render out a video of you walking through the space. Or you could do a live demo where you're walking through the space live. But all those things take computing power. It's a hassle to set up for a presentation. You don't know if there's going to be technical difficulties, all that. So I found this tool that I used here really nice, because once everything is loaded into it, when you want to share it with somebody, all it is a web link, right? We're just sending them a URL, and then they're opening this on their computer, and they can walk around in the space and see everything very clearly. Okay, so this is kind of the thing that we're going to be getting into in the next module, and we're going to tie this in with the project that we'll be doing in this module, which is going to be modeling a space. So I'm going to walk you through this a little bit. So starting here at the front entry, and if you were in my digital apps class last year, you're going to recognize this space here from one of our assignments we did. But we have our dining room, and you basically just click and you just drag around, and you can get a full 360 view. It's very similar to Google Maps Street View if you've used that, but it's all your renderings, okay? And you can look in any direction and see what everything looks like, which is really cool. And then what you do is you tie these images together. So if you look down here at the end, the bottom, you can see all my different spaces are labeled. And if I click on these, you can see I get these little prompts that pop up that say, where do you want to go next? Do you want to go to the living room? Do you want to go to the dining room? Do you want to go to the middle of the kitchen? So if I go to the living room, it's going to transition me there, and now I can look at everything from that point of view as well. Okay, and you can set up as many of these as you want, and you can even zoom in and out on things if you want to, which is really cool. Another thing this lets you do, which I did not do for this project, is you can create little information bubbles, and you can you could add an annotation to something. So if I wanted to point out the brand of this range here, I could add a little note to this that would pop up, and I could click on it and it would expand, and it would show me a photograph of the actual range. You know, maybe it's like a KitchenAid range or something, and it would give me all those details about the range right there. So you can make it interactive, which is really cool, especially professionally when you're sending this to clients who like don't really understand anything that's not three-dimensional. it's really going to help them to easily understand what you're trying to convey. Okay, but yeah, it's just a really, really cool tool. I'm just going to go through the rest of the spaces really quick so you can see how big this is. But yeah, you basically just render all these out. And again, this is all done totally in SketchUp. So SketchUp is very, very capable. If you've ever heard people say that it's not, that is not true. For rendering, it's definitely more capable than Revit is. But we have our hallway, and then here's our back entry. And then we have our laundry room. Okay, and then all these things, these ones were just items that I pulled from the SketchUp 3D warehouse and pasted in here, and they look like this straight from the 3D warehouse, so those look pretty good by default. And then the washing machine and dryer, so you can see just how detailed these are. And these were all also pulled from the 3D warehouse, but you can see they have all this detail built into them, which anything in Revit would not. There's no way you can get this level of detail from something in Revit, which is why I don't really like rendering things within Revit. If I can do something in SketchUp and get higher quality models like this, I'm always going to do that. But it just depends on the project and what you're working on. Even like the walls, I was able to add in sort of a drywall texture to make it look a little bit more realistic. We have some storage bins. And you can see how kind of the material on this really pops. So I'm going to cover like how to do all this type of stuff later on in the course. But dog food, bowls, we have water, food, all that. But yeah, you can make some really cool like interactive tours and stuff, which is the focus of our upcoming projects. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is briefly talk to you about this assignment that we're going to be doing within this module. So I'm going to pull up here kind of what I started. So what I'm going to want you all to do for this assignment for Module 2 is choose a space, and I'm just going to keep it simple. We don't have to do a ton of different rooms and things like that. It would be nice to, but I know everybody has different constraints. Some of you are living in the dorms, some of you are living at home, and it's hard for you to like access things. So I know everybody at least has a bedroom. Okay. So if you want to do your dorm room, you can do the dorm room. If you want to do a room at your house, you can do a room at your house. But it can really be any space. Okay. As long as it's a reasonably sized room that has furniture and stuff in it, because we're going to be putting those things into. We're basically just recreating an existing space. All right. So for my example, I chose my office. Okay, so this is where I'm currently sitting. This is the room that I'm in. And what I did is I just measured everything, and I created a very, very basic sketch of the space. All right. So this is going to be good practice for you, because this is going to be something that you'll do all the time as professionals. Things are getting more away from sketching now with new technologies that are coming out, but there's definitely going to be times where you'll be going on site, measuring, and then taking just a notepad with you and sketching out the dimensions, and then coming back to the office and then having to produce drawings off of your sketches. That is the traditional way of doing any project within our industry. So that's what we're going to practice here. So you're going to have to choose your space, all right? And it can be your dorm room or your bedroom, or it could be an office. You could do a kitchen if you feel that ambitious to do a kitchen. And then we're going to model it. And then in the following module, we're going to take that and we're going to render it and produce a very basic walkthrough like I showed you in my examples. Okay, ideally, it would be nice to do a few different spaces off of the one that you have. And like I said, if you're living in a dorm, that's a little bit difficult because you might not necessarily have a bathroom or something attached to your space. So that's why I'm keeping it as just a one space minimum. But if you have like if you have a space that has other things connected to it, for example, if this went to a bathroom and then this went out to like a hall, which in my case, this goes to a closet and this goes to a hallway. But if I wanted to model in a couple spaces like a bathroom and then a hallway that were connected, like the connected spaces off of this, and then for my walkthrough in the following module, do a tour of all three of those spaces, that'd be awesome. That'd be ideal. And if you want to do that, I would probably give you extra credit for it as well. But for this assignment, just worry about one space. So you're going to pick your space, you're going to go around, you're going to measure everything, and you're going to produce a drawing like you're seeing here. Okay, this is going to be part of what you're turning in. You're going to be turning in this drawing exactly like you're seeing here, like I'm showing you. The way that I did this was I measured and then I just kind of roughly sketched everything, and I just used grid paper. That's going to be the best way to do this. It's the cleanest way to create these drawings is if you have graph paper or grid paper, use that. And then I basically just did a scale of every two grid squares, so these big squares here, equal a foot. Okay, so then I just roughly did it that way. So I wasn't super concerned about like these dimensions. So like 12 foot, 6.5 inches. It doesn't have to be like super precise. But what I did here is I broke it down into, okay, I'm going to make this entire room 12 of these squares wide. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I guess I did 11. So you can see it doesn't matter. Right, it's not perfect. And then this one is like 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so I did like 11 by 10. So it's close. It's not perfect, right? But if you use your squares on a grid paper and you just give it a scale like that and don't worry about these other dimensions, just round up to the nearest foot and do it that way, you can get something that is proportionally pretty close to what it is in reality. So then I added in my doors, added in my windows, so it's a very basic space. And then where I'm sitting right now is basically right here. So I have a desk that kind of wraps all the way around from here to there, so it's a U shape, and I'm sitting right here. But we're going to model this and then add in those pieces of furniture. So like I would be putting my desk in and stuff, and maybe even my computer monitor, and my desk chair. And then over here, I have a bookcase in this corner. So we're going to be just modeling the space, putting in the doors and windows, putting in the basic pieces of furniture. Okay. And that's what this assignment's going to be for this module. Just creating the bare space with the bare components. And then next module, when we get into more rendering focused stuff, we're going to be putting the materials within the model and kind of taking it to that next level. All right, so for this, you don't have to worry about like going super in depth. All you really have to worry about is getting the minimum things in there. So the floors and the walls and the doors and the windows and all that, the ceiling, right? And your furniture. Okay, so that's what the assignment's going to be. And also, you should do at least one elevation. So I also have this elevation here, and this is just one of the walls with the windows on it. So I sketched my window where it goes in the wall, and then I add in my vertical dimensions. So I have a dimension for how tall my baseboard is. I have a dimension for how high my windowsill is off the floor, and then for how tall the window itself is. And this dimension here, this 5 foot half an inch, this is the dimension of the window itself. So like the actual glass portion of the window. All the casing around it, I just made a note that this is going to be 4.5 inches wide by 3/4 of an inch deep. So based on that, you pretty much have your dimensions. If you know how wide the window is, which this is a 32-inch wide window by 5 foot tall window, you can basically create all of your trim off of that, right? We just need to know that I'm offsetting from the perimeter of the window out 4.5 inches to get my thickness of my trim, and then the thickness is the width of my trim. Then the thickness is just going to be 3/4 of an inch. So yeah, it's not too crazy, and you could even do some more close-up sketches if you wanted to and get all these little dimensions in here. But you don't have to go crazy with it. You can just do like what I have here, just the basic idea, the general main dimensions. If you want to go crazy with it and do every little thing you can, like here I have my 1/2 inch overhang here. This kind of sticks out a little bit at the top further. But you don't have to note those things on your drawing. It can be something where as you're working on this, if you realize, oh, I actually need to get the dimension of, how deep is the windowsill, or how far does the windowsill overhang here on the right side, just take your measuring tape and walk over to it and measure it, and then add that to the model. You don't need to put this into your schematic sketches that you're doing. All right. Now the best way to do this as well, because I'm going to want you to submit this as part of the assignment, is take your phone or your iPad or whatever. I use my iPad, and first sketch everything out on a piece of paper like I did here. Then using a PDF maker app, the one that I used is just Adobe PDF, I think is what it's called. I used it on my iPad. All you have to do is just take a photo of your sketches, and you can put all the sketches into one PDF file. You can see I have both of these in a single file. And then you want to just, within that application, save it, and then probably email it to yourself, and then save it on your computer. And then you're just going to be submitting that PDF file to me. And then you're going to be referencing the PDF as you go ahead and actually model the space. All right. So make sure you download an app to do that if you don't have one already. Measure out your space that you want to do for the assignment, and then start creating your drawing and dimensioning everything to the level that I am showing you here. And then we're just going to go ahead and model it, so you can start modeling it now. Now I'm going to cut this video off here because this one's getting really long, and I'm not going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to do a very quick version of this so that you can see how I model this and work off of these dimensions. All right, so I'm going to cut this one off, and I'm going to start another video, and I'm just going to show you this really quickly.